Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. It is wonderful to be with you here today for our Rapid Research Lab. I'm joined by Anthony Lamb. I am Patrick Hyland. We'll introduce ourselves in a second, but we're really excited to have you join us today and witness this live conversation that we're going to have with frontline supervisors at 12:15. So we're really excited to have you join us, to have you watch this conversation unfold, to help us develop some questions that we can ask on the back end during this webinar to learn from this really valuable employee population. So we do have a live session starting at 12:15, but before we get there, we just wanted to put in context what we're doing today. So back in January, for those of you who joined our first webinar of the year, we took a look at employee attitudes for 2026, and we asked employees from non-management all the way up to C-suite about their expectations for the year. And we really learned quite a bit about frontline supervisors. In fact, we learned so much that we wanted to dig into their experiences at work and learn more about them. And that's really what set up the webinar and the live event that we're going to conduct today. So at 12:15, Anthony and I are going to launch a Remesh live conversation. It will be brief, but it will be focused on one of the critical topics that emerged in that January webinar and that January data. After we collect the data, we'll aggregate it, and then we'll start to analyze it together as a group, and we would love all of you to participate in that process. As we analyze that data, we're going to be using the full suite of Remesh analytical tools, but we're really going to focus in on Remy, our new research agent that really is helping us generate deeper insights in short periods of time. So we want to show you how that's working and also get your questions for that analysis. And then we'll wrap up with the Q&A. So we're really excited for all of you to join today. Just a little bit about ourselves. Anthony, I'll start and then I'll hand it over to you. I know that many of you know us, and we're really delighted to have you join us on today's webinar. I am the Director of Employee Research at Remesh, and it's really wonderful to be here with all of you, and particularly to be here with you, Anthony, as you help me conduct this study. And I would love for you to just introduce yourself as we jump in.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. Happy to be here with y'all today on this webinar as we go through some kind of employee research learnings with Remesh, with Remy, kind of as our co-researcher. I've been here at Remesh for just over 5 years. It's been a journey. I've been in the market research space for about 9, almost 10 years. Um, so yeah, as Patrick mentioned, I'll be running the session. You'll see me kind of at work behind the scenes and chiming in when I need to chime in.
Thank you so much, Anthony. So we've worked closely together as we pulled together both this webinar and the research that we're about to conduct. And so it really will be, I think, a fascinating opportunity for all of us to take a look at the research from a strategic perspective, from an actual implementation perspective, and then at the back end from an analytical perspective. So with that in mind, let me try to put this study that we're about to conduct in context and just ground all of us. And let me go back to some of that data that we gathered at the beginning of the year and try to give us all a sense of what the frontline supervisor experience seems to be, at least based on some preliminary data. So for those of you who did join our January webinar, you may remember that one of the fundamental questions that we asked of employees from non-management up to the C-suite was about their confidence levels in their organizations as the new year begins. And so over on the left, I'm showing you the data that we gathered from supervisors. And what really stood out is that 1 out of 3 supervisors felt either uncertain or doubtful that this will be a successful year. For all of us in the employee research space, whether we're working as a consultant or we're working internally, we know how critical frontline supervisors are to the overall organization, both from an engagement perspective and a performance perspective. Really compelling quote over on the right, coming out of a Forbes article just recently. And essentially, what the author talks about is the frontline leader is the face of the company to the frontline worker. The CEO sets the overall mandate, but it's that frontline leader who is really shaping the day-to-day experience. And they have a tremendous influence on the organization, both in terms of the workforce and the productivity and the performance of the organization. I would argue, as an employee researcher, if you were going to go out and you were going to gather data from just one subgroup within your organization, going to those frontline supervisors is probably the best place to start. They really have this interesting linchpin perspective, being able to see both what's going on below them and above them. And so, with that in mind, we also, as we looked at that January data, wanted to understand, given the fact that 1 out of 3 supervisors is feeling doubtful or uncertain about the new year, what they're worried about. And so, if you participated in that webinar, you may recall we asked questions about concerns. And what we found for frontline supervisors is they had 4 main concerns. One was around job and business security in a very tough economy. 2 was about staffing, workload, and burnout. 3 was pay and financial strain, and 4 was leadership, quality, direction, and team dynamics. All of this emerging from our chat with Remy, the research agent that I mentioned. So we wanted to follow up. We concluded that webinar, and I know we're watching time. We have 9 minutes until we actually launch this conversation. But we concluded that January webinar by recommending problem-solving dialogues. What we know at Remesh and what researchers have found is that when we can involve critical stakeholders like supervisors in problem-solving discussions, it is empowering, it is engaging, and it can be, for the organization, beneficial in terms of driving real performance. And so what we wanted to do was to pick up on this recommendation we made in January and essentially see if we start a 5-minute conversation with supervisors, how much can we learn collectively? And so what we're going to be doing at 12:15 as I transition over to Anthony and he launches the conversation is exploring these 4 questions. Of course, it could have been a longer conversation, but it wouldn't have fit within context of the webinar. But we came up with these questions actually by looking at that January data, looking at supervisor concerns, and then asking Remy in a dialogue, design questions that would make sense for this brief 5-minute participatory discussion. And these are the questions that Remy and I came up with. And these are the questions that we'll actually be launching to the audience, to our supervisors in just a couple of minutes. So here's our plan. Here's what we're going to be doing in just a couple of minutes. We are using Remesh's on-platform Recruit to gather 50 supervisors in 50 different organizations. Anthony is going to launch a live 5-minute flex conversation using those questions I just showed you. We're then going to aggregate that data during this webinar, and then we're going to look at that data. And really the intent here is to understand how much can we learn in a very short period of time. I think the take-home implications are this is something you can replicate, obviously beyond a 5-minute window, but we wanted to give everyone a sense of what this can look like. So we have about 6 minutes as we get ready to launch this live conversation. This is a wonderful point where, Gabby, I know you're with us. I would love to get from participants any questions that you have about the study we're about to launch, the experience that we're noticing supervisors in our first study of the year are having, or anything else that really stands out before we get ready for this conversation. If you do have questions as participants, feel free to chat those in, and then Gabby will read those off to us. And also, just to help you think ahead, as you start to watch the data flow in, we're going to shift over from this PowerPoint. I'm going to stop sharing into the actual live conversation. You may want to start thinking about analytical questions that you're going to want to see us ask during the back half of the webinar. So let me pause there and just see, Gabby, if anyone has any questions they want to chat in from the audience.
Patrick, we have one here from Olivia Greenwood. She says, what are strategies to get frontline managers to engage in a remes session given their responsibilities that they have to workers on the floor and their job duties?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So, I mean, I think at the heart of that, what I'm hearing is these are really super busy employees and they are super busy right now. So, if that's the case, we completely understand, we get it. I think a couple of things can help. One is that remesh conversations can be super short. We're about to do a 5-minute conversation. They can be super short. They can also be very flexible. You don't need to gather everybody all at once. You can do this over a period of time. You can ask one, two, three questions over a 2-week window, and I think really get that collective crowdsourcing. I think the third thing is we find that the experience of participating in a remesh conversation is in and of itself engaging and dynamic because of the participation process. But obviously, it's taking all that information and turning it into action is, I think, where you also build a lot of faith in the process. So, completely get the challenge of it. We find, though, that employees, supervisors, non-management, middle management, they're eager to engage in conversations if they are meaningful and lead to action. But a great question. Other comments, other people may have different responses, right? So you can chime in as we wait. We're going to launch this conversation in just a couple of minutes. Um, any other questions or comments as we prepare for this? I'll ask a question. You can all chat in. Some of you I know are Remesh users. I would love to see just in the chat by a show of hands or response, how many of you are using Remy current state analytically on the back end? You'll be able to start using it to generate discussion guides in just about a week, I believe. So that's exciting. But how many of you are using it analytically on the back end? Or if you haven't used Remesh, let us know that too in the chat, because that will really help us understand how much to frame what we're about to show you.
And as y'all are responding to Patrick's question, I can actually start screen sharing and show you just how quick this process was that Patrick kind of undertook to kind of get us here. So this is the audience page. This is how I did the recruit. I ran this a couple days ago just to make sure we had, enough people actually providing us the data. But this audience recruit actually took 3 minutes. It enabled kind of audience recruit. We call it on-demand recruit. Here at Remesh, I specified the number of people. I specified how long the study was going to be. It's actually 5, 6 minutes. 10 was the minimum. My audience market, date and time, and then just some audience criteria, frontline supervisors, and then how long or how many people they are supervising. So this setup process took me just a couple minutes. And then I know, Patrick, you kind of alluded to creating this discussion guide, this questionnaire that we're going to run. It's 7 total elements, 5 which are questions. The first and last element are just introductory kind of messaging to the audience. So he did that with the Create DG, Create Discussion Guide with Remy. This will be live March 9th. So if you're short on time and do need to run even a small study, you don't need to draft it from scratch. You'll be able to shortly roll into Remesh, create kind of a discussion guide based on objectives, your learning objectives, even get the access to the audience that you're interested in, kind of provide those data points in just a few minutes, and then launch. We'll get to the launch in just a minute here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump on over to the live experience. And so if you're really pressed on time, you don't even need to babysit and send out these messages, these questions to the audience yourself. We can turn on the auto send feature. So I'll send them since we're doing a live experience here, but we're live. So okay, it's telling me we're slightly below the number. We targeted 50. or slightly below. That's okay. We can work with 23, 24, however many show up. So, okay, no, actually, we're close to 49. People are rolling in. So I'm going to send the first message since we are live. We don't want to keep our live audience waiting 25 seconds into the experience. So I'm going to send this off. And here we go. So we are live with that first kind of introductory message. And up next, we have our first open-end question. So,
And Anthony, what was so interesting as I worked with Remy to develop this discussion guide were the suggestions it provided back, right? And so we collaborated together, but I was able to generate this discussion guide by asking Remy to go look at that January conversation, as I mentioned, and say, really, what do these supervisors what do they need to share and what more do I need to know? And what I loved about that first question is it did exactly what I would have done as a researcher, which is start broad, like open up the conversation, allow for participants to start to understand this collective experience. And it really will frame up the next question that we're about to see.
great. So Patrick, you're talking about compounding value from kind of rolling from previous research that you've done into current or future research to basically enhance your learning loop to make your best possible decisions with your or other people's organizations. So we're live. We got 40 seconds or so left with this first open-end question. We're seeing the answers flow in. We can preview those answers. We can get a sense of what keywords are used um, in common by across most of the responses. So a lot of communication is the one way to help teams or units operate effectively. So 18 seconds left. We'll roll on to the next question, which is a poll
And as you roll on,
question.
Anthony, we realize that some of you, this is your first time seeing Remesh. And so as you see it, I think there are a couple of ways to understand the platform. I view it as a really powerful mixed method, rapid research platform. And what I mean by that is it allows me to ask open and closed-ended questions to participants, to organizational stakeholders, and to really understand emerging complex issues. What you do as a participant is when you get an open end, you have the opportunity to respond, um, just like writing a text. And then after you respond, you start to see other comments from people within this conversation, and you're asked to endorse those comments that resonate with you, or not endorse those that don't. And that really that creates, I think, a unique conversational experience for participants. But analytically, it also helps us out quite a bit. So, Anthony, I see you're rolling along. This conversation is just moving quickly.
Yep.
Again, to provide some context for first-time users, usually you have about a minute and a half, maybe 2 minutes to answer one of the open ends, and then the closed-ended questions. It's a shorter window of time. You usually only need 15 to maybe 30 seconds.
Yep. And we're now in a branch open-end question, meaning this has two paths based on the preceding poll. How people answered this preceding poll. We've bucketed them into two tracks, I think very high to moderate, or very high to somewhat high, and then the remaining options. So we're kind of creating two paths for people to provide some follow-up context for why they selected their option in the previous poll.
What's interesting is we see this data roll in. We're not even in the analytical space yet. We're going to close the conversation soon. We're going to bake this data quickly. But just as researchers and insights professionals see the data flow in, we're already able to start making sense of this unique sample, right? What I saw for that closed end up above is most of these participants feel that their organization is currently operating either very effectively or somewhat effectively. I think those were the two scale points. But that really suggests that the people on this call today in this Remesh session are having some really operationally efficient experiences. Of course, we're going to be able to analyze this all on the back end in a couple of minutes. But this is interesting too, Anthony, this question, which, if I recall, is about challenges. And asking participants to select the three challenges that they're currently facing. So
Top three.
here, here we're really seeing that while this participant group feels that they are operating effectively, they are still facing challenges with staffing, gaps in staffing around training and technology emerging at the top of the list. So we're already able to start sense making in the moment. Um, it's 12:20. We just started this webinar 20 minutes ago, and we just started this session less than 5 minutes ago.
And we're already on the last question. So in terms of a quick turnaround, we're about to close this out, and we'll see what we are able to learn collectively
Yeah.
once we've closed out the study.
Yeah, as Anthony does that, the thing that stands out to me, so I'm trained as an organizational psychologist. I worked for 20 years as principally an employee engagement survey specialist. That's a lot of what I did, and I started working with the Remesh platform about 5 years ago. Um, I think what really stands out about the platform that I think is so important. There is always going to be a place for traditional organization-wide engagement surveys. What Remesh allows, though, for is this exploration of these complex emerging issues in real time. The ability to ask questions in the moment and then make sense of that really quickly, I think, is one of its value adds. The other is a lot of consultative projects involve a lot of different feedback processes and mechanisms, one-on-one interviews, focus group surveys. The platform allows for that nimble data collection on consulting projects. And then the third thing, and this is, I think, what I'm getting the most energy out of in this 5 minute conversation, is it allows for curiosity driven inquiry. And I think a lot of times when we're doing traditional research, we lose the curiosity, we lose the ability to be curious and get so caught up in the empiricism of it, which is important and we value. But I think we miss a lot of these opportunities to learn in the moment.
I want to interrupt you, Patrick. We're actually up on the last closing message, but before I close the audience out, on your point about how this is different than a standard kind of asynchronous survey experience, I'm just pulling up on this question. One of the top kind of big ideas was implement new processes. What are ways that we can actually increase operational efficiency, introduce standardized, new, more efficient processes? What I could do that I couldn't do on a traditional survey, I could just ad hoc now send a follow-up probe based on what I'm seeing live in the audience data and say, tell me more about processes. Like what specific processes have you seen work or not work? And why would you and how would you want to adapt these into your organization? Something like that. I'm not going to do that because we promised them that we would kind of finish in a timely manner. So I'm going to send that message out. But that is one of the flexibilities that you have with the Remesh platform. You can follow up and learn more, stay curious, as Patrick was saying. So sending that off, and I'm gonna end this
Yeah.
so we can keep everyone on a schedule, so to
Wonderful.
speak.
So thank you, Anthony, for running that. So we need to bake this data, right? Remesh needs to aggregate this data. And so Anthony is going to oversee that process. While he oversees that process, I would love to um, do a couple of things, talk about what we're going to do next, but also open up the floor, right? You just saw a whole bunch of data spill in and spin in, and you probably saw some numbers and they probably caught your eye. And if you're new to Remesh, you may not have understood them all. So we're going to start to go through those in short order. But I do want to ask any and all of you, as you saw that unfold in front of you, um, what are the questions that you may have as we start to transition into a demonstration of what you can do analytically with this data? So I'm going to ask that question, and it looks like as I do that, Anthony, you already have something for us to look at and understand.
Yeah, so when you end the conversation, the first thing you'll see immediately is just kind of a call to action to let you know that there are different ways that you can begin to explore your data. Um, Question summaries, themes in autocode, and then you can just go into the kind of question by question analysis, which I will start with. But you saw there was a little bit of a loading screen up here. This is an overall summary. It's a little bit lengthy at this point, but we've captured a bit of data. But this is an overall take across all five question capturing 5 data capturing questions, what we learned across the 50, 53 or so people who supplied some information. So this is actually a snapshot. This is the quick takeaway from our summarize experience. So that's actually, so I've opened up summarize. I've kind of jumped from the live experience directly into the summary. And that little summary that you saw comes from here. This is the overall conversation level summary. So participants consistently link high operational efficiency to communication. Not surprising, we kind of saw that as the session was running live. Let me actually just make this bigger. Communication, clear roles, supportive, competent leadership. So we actually saw, what could change. So some people did say new leaders. So new leaders or effective leaders are key to operational efficiency. So again, not really surprising if we're paying attention to the incoming data during the session, this makes a lot of sense. And as we're waiting for some of the other data to kind of finish processing, that unlocks Remy for us. Again, it should be just a couple more minutes from now. We can dive a little bit deeper into this and not only see the insights, but see the kind of grounding supports from the actual verbatims, the actual kind of poll distributions that we gathered. But yeah, let's see. To improve efficiency, better and ongoing training. We saw that as a theme that was actually up there with, I think, the processes. Yeah, workflows, another word for process. So,
You
um,
know, what's so interesting, Anthony, as you do this is uh, I think what we're seeing in the moment, and it's the first time I've really witnessed this firsthand, is Remesh is democratizing the research process. And what I mean by that is, so I'm the one with the org psych degree, right, and the training, and I would normally be the one that would start making the points that you just started to make. You were able to summarize, synthesize, generate insights, the same ones I would have generated um, through the platform and the process. Now, as I say that, we're not trying to oversell. We still value the importance of research expertise, and we do really think that the best way to use the platform is to combine insights and research expertise with the platform and the knowledge and Remy. But it is just amazing to see in the moment how any and all of us can use this process of inquiry, this platform, to start to generate insights. And that democratization of the process is very important if we're going to be creating more nimble organizations. So I just, that was fascinating to see. So let's just orient everybody to everything that we're seeing. Again, if you have used Remesh before, all of this will be familiar. If you haven't used Remesh before, this may seem overwhelming, and we're happy to send out any and all of what we're going to show you and provide more of a context. But what I would say as a researcher, what I really value is that Remesh allows me, and Anthony doesn't need to go to all these places and spaces, but it allows me as a researcher to immediately get the raw data in a CSV file if I need it. And I can do all the exploration as I traditionally would outside the platform. So I have that ability. The second thing is that the platform immediately generates a PDF top line that if I needed to, I could take to an executive, I could take internally and say, look, here are descriptively what we're seeing in the open and closed ends, right? So those are the basics. As I move beyond the basics, those are immediately available. I then start to move into the large language model driven capabilities. And what stands out to me as a researcher is that it allows us to analyze the data from a content code perspective using autocode. And that's what Anthony is showing you actually right now. And also summarize. Those two features allow us to make sense of the qualitative data that we just gathered super quickly and prevents us from getting bogged down. The third thing, and this is where we'll start to play together as a group with the data, is Remy, which is that AI-powered research agent that's allowing me to explore this data in ways that extend beyond just auto-coding and summarizing. And that's really profound. So that's kind of a high-level orientation to some of the analytical capabilities in this suite. It's 12:30. We're together for 15 more minutes. So as Anthony and I start to digest this data together and with you, we would love if you have any questions, and Gabby, if you could monitor any of the chats. If there are any questions you are dying to ask of the data through Remy right now, we'll give you all a little bit of a moment to come up with those questions. And as we do that, Anthony and I will start to use Remy to explore the data.
Yeah. I actually just fired, as Patrick was talking, I just fired up Remy directly from the data set. So you can be exploring and then you can just fire off Remy. It'll pull this data set into the data scope. But I wanted just to kind of look at the autocode space. Again, we're seeing this is the first open-end question. What are things that really help operational efficiencies, communication? Again, not surprising. We saw this. What is interesting here is that inclusive environment was one of the 30 total responses. So you can get into the weeds a little bit, but we're into Remy now. Um, I'm going to start with this question. A good question that both Patrick and I have actually used across many data sets that we've kind of gathered ourselves for kind of internal research and or webinars like this one. So there are, some pre-baked questions. I think they're like 10 or 11, 12 that you can kind of cycle through if you need help getting started. Like this is a great getting started one. I'm even starting simpler. Again, I don't have any research experience. I'm just going to ask for the story. Hit submit and we'll see what comes of this. So.
And
Anthony, while that's processing, we do have a question from the audience. Are there any demographics that stand out from the frontline managers that we should explore more?
a great question. So with time in mind, we only had one demographic question at the start of the conversation, and it was about how many employees do you supervise? So we can do a cut by that. You, though, can ask as many demographic questions as you want. We usually ask gender, level, unit, so many. But for today's purposes, in this brief 5-minute conversation, we didn't want the participants to have to answer a number of onboarding questions. And Anthony is actually showing you within the platform that distribution. But so thank you for that. Thank you. Great question. And thank you, Gabby, for passing that on. So Anthony, back to your big, broad question, right? And I've talked to Anthony about this. I am tech skeptical. And that said, I have fallen in love with Remy. Um, I had a lot of anxiety about getting questions right to generate the right insights. Of course, that's important. But what I have found is that I can start broad. I can start conceptual. I can start with questions like, what's the big story? And it provides back to me that gestalt, that big picture that I crave as a insights professional, as a former English major, as someone who plays with data. So Anthony, as we digest the data and you hear that, what are your thoughts from a product perspective and as someone who has designed this process?
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the audience that we're kind of going after. We understand that generally, researchers, the research space is not necessarily the most. They're not maybe described as early adopters for cutting edge technology necessarily, and so we wanted to build out a solution that was, two things: efficient. Like I think everyone in the tech space is saying efficiency, speed, low cost, but really being offering something that did that was grounded in trustworthiness. We actually did some research internally here at Remesh and with some of our customers around technology and the use of technology to advance research forward. And the biggest obstacle, the biggest takeaway was around trustworthiness. If the insights from a solution like this are true, this is fantastic. But how do we know they're true? And so part of what we spent a lot of time doing, and I can show you, you can see a lot of these numbers on the screen. And if you've used Remy, you know what this is. These are footnote citations to underlying pieces of data that we just gathered. So I'm going to click into one of these. But each of these has an annotation for what question the kind of insight is derived from, and what component of the question. So you'll see some pulling from, question 3. I think this was a poll question. This is how would you rate the operational efficiencies? I think this is an open-ended branch. So you'll see things like the summaries that we pulled in from Summarize. You'll see actual verbatim responses as well. Footnote number 4 that drove this insight point number 1 that people feel operations are working well overall. Um, so what's working well? This person said meeting deadlines, collaborating effectively. Uh, if you really want to make sure that's there, we give you a link. It's going to open up the question once it loads.
And it's
It
so
should jump to the
interesting
question. It should
as
jump to here. So
you know, as this opens, to me there is a verify builds trust element to this, right? So I don't approach Remy from a trust and verify. I can't as a responsible researcher, but from a seeing what Remy surfaces, looking at the footnotes, the more that I can verify its logic, the more I trust in what it is providing back to me as the researcher. And that's really where I see the power of this. And that's really where I can partner with this. So the fact that all those verification sources are there for me to vet is very powerful. So on one point, that allows me to find these results to be warrantable. These are warrantable results from a pragmatic perspective. I think the whole idea of truth is a philosophy of science question, which is bigger and broader. But these I find are trustable, warrantable. And look at the insights, actually. I mean, that's where I get really excited as you go back to that, Anthony. We just did this. This is a discovery moment for all of us. And, I started to look at the data as it streamed in, and I was like, oh, it doesn't really look like it's going to be that interesting. Everybody is super happy. It looked like on that first question about rate the efficiency of the organization. Remy's picking up on that. People feel operations are working well overall. But look at the nuance that comes in with that second point. However, this performance is fragile, propped up against stress, tech friction, and staffing training gaps with the verification underneath. And I think as a researcher, as an insights professional, this starts to become fascinating how much we just learned in a 5-minute experience. We were excited and perhaps a little anxious. We do these kind of live events with insights all the time for our clients. We don't usually do it in a webinar setting, and we don't usually do it in this compact and compressed of a time. But I think what's fascinating is, as I look at this is the start of a lot of really rich insights that we just gathered in a 6-minute window. I also love, Anthony, as you look at this, just this first, and this is still just your first question, right?
yep.
The summary at the end. Teams believe they are currently efficient and collaborative, but they see that efficiency as vulnerable to stress, weak infrastructure, and then staffing. Does this ring true in your own organization? You got to replicate it there. You have to do it there. But as we talk to 50 frontline supervisors across 50 organizations, here's what we're seeing from this population. So it looks like you're about to put in a second.
I have a second question. This is based on that question about segments. So I'm just going to try something. We're jazzing. Thank you, Patrick, for uh, using that vocabulary. That's I think really apt. So I'm kind of hitting that segment question about how many employees you supervise, and then are there any notable differences between across those different segments in regards to what can be done to increase operational efficiencies? I believe it's question 6. I just wanted to be as specific as possible. Um, we'll see what happens. Oh, try it again. If not, we can try another question.
Yeah. And so
That shouldn't have happened. So
as Anthony works on there, as Remy works on this, Anthony and I are happy to stay over. We know that we wrap this up in just about 5 minutes. If you can stay, by all means, please do. If not, that's okay. We will be sending out a recording from today's presentation. In that recording, we'll also send along that deck that we started. There's our contact information. We're happy to answer any of your questions about replicating this in your own organization. Your experiences with Remy, we'd love to hear. And if this is all just brand new to you, happy to provide um, a an overview that may not have hit quite as fast and furious as this did. So it looks like to your question, Anthony, something's coming back, right?
Yep. And it found similarities and it found the kind of distinctives of each of those segment groups. So I think the summary is a quick way to kind of glean all segments. So again, let's just look at the segments that we have for this study. Um, People who supervise 1 to 9, 10 to 19, 20 or more. So it's just going to different the team sizing. All agree on processing, streamlining, better communication, more training. Okay, I think we saw that again when the data was coming in live. Couldn't really tell which segments were doing or contributing to what for this question. Small team supervisors push hardest on communication, training, basic staffing fixes. Large team supervisors are concerned with reducing stress overall for their large teams. And again, we can kind of pick into this. Okay, this person who supervises, a large 19, make sure, yeah, 19. Okay, so that's here. Um, Reducing stress. That's the actual response from that supervisor. So again, this is all auditable by going through. And again, if you click, it'll open up to the question. It doesn't jump to the response, but something we can actually do. Um,
That's amazing. I do see there are a couple of questions, so I want to, if those are in, Gabby, if you could share those with us. What I'll say just quickly is um, a couple of things. So I have seen and I have used Remy to essentially climb the consultative ladder of abstraction. And what I mean by that is you can use Remy to find specific facts. You can use Remy to interpret and explore the data. You can use Remy abductively. I have asked Remy to analyze data through theory and research models, Quinn's competing values framework for culture, sense of coherence, and it comes back with that analysis, which is amazing. And you can use Remy to generate recommendations, summaries, 2 minute if I need to go give a presentation on this data. So it is really fascinating what it can do. And I'm sure all of you are using it in different ways. In the second quarter, we're going to really want to share and understand what you're doing with Remy for those of you using it. But it is profound what it can do. I think there may be some questions that come in. The one thing I always love to ask is what's paradoxical? What are the paradoxes in the data? Because I always find them, and Remy always finds them for me. It's something that traditionally I could do as a researcher. I still can, but the amount of time it takes me to do it versus what Remy usually does, it's just night and day. So as we kind of wrap up, and Anthony puts that last question in, and we'll see what it generates. Gabby, any questions that came in from the Q&A that we could ask of Remy before we start to wrap up?
I don't have, it's not a Remy question, but someone asked, the format where employees can see the responses of others is interesting. How do leaders handle that kind of transparency in a way it's almost like a focus group?
Yeah. Well, look, it is a far more efficient focus group because in a focus group, you have one person speaking at a time. In a remesh conversation, you have up to 1,000 people speaking at a time, and you just gather so much more data. So it is a focus group. It's been described by many consultancies as a focus group on steroids, hyper efficient, tremendous amount of voice. To your question, though, about the ask opinion type, where you respond as a participant and then you start to see other responses from other participants. Um, can it be a double-edged sword? It can be. What we generally find is it creates quite a bit of trust in the process, psychological safety, participation, energy, because you're starting to sense make and see what other people say. That was my first experience, not as a remesh practitioner, but just as an employee participating in a remesh session. I just love the sense making aspect of it. But here's the thing, if you're asking a question that's risky and you don't want your participants to have that view of other comments, you can ask an open end and not have that voting exercise. So you can still gather rich qualitative data. You can still talk to 1,000 people at once. You can still analyze it in Remy on the back end, auto code it, summarize it, and not have that voting exercise. So we need to be diligent and mindful when we use the ask opinion endorse question and when we don't.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Looks like the paradoxes came back as Gabby surfaces other questions. So Gabby, I'd love to hear that, and I'd love to digest the paradoxes because I always find them fascinating.
Go ahead and do that, Patrick.
Okay. So self-ratings and narratives are very positive, yet they report substantial systemic obstacles underneath that success. Leadership is simultaneously a strength and a failure point. I know we're digesting this quickly, but there seems to me to be a sense of coherence between what we hear in this 5 minute conversation and some of the themes that emerged a month ago in that first conversation. Two different sets of frontline supervisors, but this challenge, this sense that look, some things are going well, and we saw that back in January. We did see that 2 out of 3 frontline supervisors were confident in their organization, but then we come back a month later, we talk to a different set of supervisors and we say, look, yeah, by and large, things are operationally efficient for this group of supervisors, but there are these tensions, challenges, fragility underneath. Um, and that seems to be consistent across those conversations. And I think what many of us are sensing and hearing when we actually talk to frontline supervisors, they're managing the tension and the paradox of the role and of these really challenging times. I think with that, Anthony, anything else really incredibly helpful, facilitating the conversation, driving the analysis, and helping me interpret the data. So thank you. Anything else you wanted to add either about the data, the process, Remy, or Remesh before we start to wrap up?
Uh, Everything that you see that we did today, you can do, including the discussion guide questionnaire creation coming up in about a week and a half. So that's that's it for me.
Wonderful. Well, Anthony, thank you. Gabby, thank you. Emma, thank you. And everyone who joined today, thank you so much. We will send out a copy of today's presentation, this recording. If you have questions, our email addresses are included in the deck that you'll receive. We hope you enjoyed. Next month, we will, late March, early April, we'll be talking more about how we responsibly integrate AI into organizational research, employee research, market research, and how you can use Remy from A to Z to really streamline the process and generate better insights in a shorter period of time. We really hope you enjoyed today's presentation, and we hope to see you later in March or early in April. Thank you so much.